Okay, I'm going to talk about the philosophy of war. So, the way I see it, there's kind of two outlooks, okay? There's the deterministic outlook, which basically says that, I mean, the reason I call it deterministic is because it assumes that human behaviors are bound to the laws of physics, okay? And what I mean by that is action, leads to reaction, etc. And in effect, if a foreign invader attacks you, you're going to attack back. And then they're going to attack back. It's going to be a cycle of reactions until one side gains the upper hand, right? So that's why I call it the deterministic outlook. Okay, and the other outlook is the indeterministic outlook. Okay, it's the one that says, rather, it's the one that recognizes this action reaction cycle, this vicious cycle, and because it recognizes the end, the end conclusion, the logical conclusion, it seeks to stop it in its tracks. Okay, and what that ultimately means is that one side of the conflict is going to have to step up and be the bigger person, or the bigger party, right? The bigger nation. They're going to have to forgive the other nation for their trespasses, right? They're going to have to essentially forgive them for the violence that they've inflicted upon themselves. And that can be hard to do, right? It can be very hard to do because, I mean, at its core, all military conflict stems from fear, right? If somebody attacks you, because say they're not fearful of you, but somebody attacks you because they want to control you, you become fearful. So you seek to control that fear. Okay, and this is how fear works. Whenever you fear something, you seek to control the fear. If you fear a heart attack, you're going to probably start eating healthier and exercising, right? You're going to seek control over that fear. The same applies to the military. Okay, it applies to every fear that's ever existed. When you fear something, you're going to seek control over that fear. It's basic human emotions, right? And reactions to those emotions. So, on the other hand, again, the conscious outlook, it thinks about it a little more logically. Okay, it says that instead of trying to control my fear, we're going to think long term and recognize the logical conclusion that is effectively a world war if we continue these vicious cycles of war. So, in that sense, if you fear world war more than, I don't know, giving up a little bit of land, for example, Ukraine giving up a little land to Russia, then the logical conclusion is to give that land up and, again, avoid the world war in the long term. Okay, so the bottom line is that the world wars today, if there was a world war today, it would be a nuclear war, right? That's what the modern technology has led to. Okay, we have nukes, and therefore, if there is a world conflict, it might involve nukes. Okay, I mean, the technology we have is scary today. But along with that nuclear technology, we've also invented some other things. Okay, we've invented the internet. Now, the internet it has a lot of power, right? The internet could drive us into a world war, but it also has the power to drive us away from one. And the way it would do that is by basically assimilating cultures around the world. You can talk with anyone from anywhere, whenever you want, pretty much, using the internet. You can, and essentially, the internet gives you the power to see these other cultures for your similarities rather than your differences. But if we use the internet to highlight our differences rather than our similarities, then what's going to happen? Well, we're going to become divided rather than united. At the end of the day, the internet's just a tool. We can use it to unite or divide. And if we use it to unite, then we will kind of create benevolent cycles that avoid the nuclear conflicts, right? So, again, so the fear leads to control, okay? You seek control over the things you fear. So, if we look at all of the past conflicts, military conflicts throughout human history, we've basically seen a cycle of fear and control, okay? And it goes in both directions in every conflict we've ever seen. And that conflict and that cycle rather, has lived on to today, right? The militaries who run the world governments today, they are still living in that cycle, that vicious cycle. So the ruling class, or rather the generals and the politicians, the military advisors, the people who advise the president and all of the other various militaries around the world, they look at history through this lens, through this vicious cycle lens, and they don't see the logical conclusion that is nuclear war, because all they can see is this deterministic action-reaction outlook. Basically, our military advisors, they live in echo chambers that are filled with the intel that drives them towards war, because that's the intel they're getting. They're not using the internet to assimilate with other cultures. They're using the internet to basically give them all of the most recent intel of their enemy, right? They're using the new technology to show them the potential ways that their enemy can attack them. They're not showing all of the great cultural advancements that we're having around the world. And like I said, the military advisors, they live in echo chambers. They live in echo chambers that encourage fear, and that fear leads to them to seek control over those fears. Again, they're stuck in this vicious cycle of action-reaction. And what this really means is that the military advisors out there, of today rather, they're literally the most fearful people in the world. They live in echo chambers that encourage fear. And they are in the positions they're in because they sought to control those fears. Okay, so the average public working class citizen in the United States, they're just trying to live a quiet life and a comfortable living, right? And pay their bills, right? They're just trying to have a regular life. The people who find themselves in the positions of power, they find themselves, it's not an accident that they're there. They control the military because they sought those positions of control. They sought the military control because that is the most effective way to control your fears. Or so they think. Again, because of that, the military advisors in this country, they are the most fearful people in the world. You don't typically think of that, of a general as a fearful person. You think of them as a hard ass, right? You think of them as some badass guy who's going to run into battle. But that's not really the case, okay? The truth is that those people who seek positions of control, they have the most fear of anyone else in the world. And in effect, we're kind of run by psychopaths, okay? And this has been the case, again, for centuries. The psychopaths have sought these positions of control through all of these past military conflicts throughout humanity's history. And they created the narrative, and they've stayed in that narrative, that echo chamber, for so long that they think there's no way out of it. But the less fearful people, like the average middle-class citizen, who just wants to live a quiet life and wants to leave these other nations to do as they please, they're not so fearful, okay? We are actually the rational ones. We are the ones that can see this vicious cycle of war that only builds into larger wars. And we have to come together to stop these vicious cycles. We have to come together to stop the psychopaths that run the various militaries around the world, the military superpowers, and we have to take control of them. Otherwise, we will never get out of the vicious cycles of war. We will continue to fight these proxy wars that only build into world wars. This is what we have to do as working class citizens. And I don't mean just in the US, I mean across the world. We have to assimilate with each other across the world. And in doing so, you will help make it clear to these psychopaths that run the military that they are literally in the echo chambers. You will help dissolve the echo chambers by showing these military advisors the assimilation that is possible. Okay, you have to, again, recognize the similarities that you have with other people around the world rather than the differences. And the thing is these military advisors, they live in echo chambers that are only filled with the differences. They don't see any of the similarities because they're too busy getting, again, they're in these echo chambers that only show them the intel of the potential military attacks that they'll have to face. It's, again, 99% of human behavior is based on fear. Maybe 100%. And if you don't understand that your behaviors are based on fear and you never become aware, then we're going to continue to destroy each other. You cannot fear people because they're different than you. You have to work with them. Otherwise, you bind yourself to a continuous cycle of conflict and war and violence. And you can try to hedge your bets, but it's not going to probably work out in the long term. So give that a little thought, okay? It's just a little war philosophy for you, okay? You have to understand that the people who have driven all of the military conflicts that humanity has seen in the past, they were psychopaths. They were fearful people who were so fearful that they are the ones who gained control of the positions that were able to control people. And now we have basically psychopaths that run Russia, that run the United States, that run China probably even a little bit, and they're all trying to fight each other. Meanwhile, the average working class citizen is just trying to just live a comfortable, quiet life. Become a little more conscious of the logical conclusions of war, because in the long term, nobody wins out. I think it was Confucius who said, "He who seeks revenge digs two graves." Think about that quote, okay, and understand what it insinuates. Thanks for watching.